Welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here for our webinar today on teachers' inner resilience and how we impact our students' resilience. My name is Chuck Fisher. I'm the Executive Director of Dovetail Learning. I'm a transpersonal psychologist, which is the study of well-being from all perspectives and cultures. and I love this work on resilience. So I'm super happy to be exploring this particular topic with you. I was a school counselor for 25 years, ranging from K to 12, and worked deeply with students in pain, as well as teachers, parents, and administrators. And then really working on bringing resilience to schools. So at Dovetail Learning, we spent many years bringing SEL to students, and I'll be explaining some of that in this webinar. And now we're doing SEL for adults, and we're doing that with pediatric clinics around California, as well as educators and county offices of education, and also with families. So just a little bit about Dovetail. We are all about strengthening resilience, both in adults and children, and we do that to make the world a better place. And part of the way we do that is we offer our resources as open education resources, which means it's part of the public domain. You can go on our website and download anything for free, use it, adapt it. If you want to publish something using our work, the license requires that you give attribution, collaborate, and share back, and then share with the same kind of license. So it's whatever you create is free and available for everyone. What we're going to do today is about supporting your resilience, teachers' resilience. We're going to just look basically at a shared definition of what it is. Then we're going to look at stress and how we handle it matters. And then the relationship between our own and students' resilience. This is a 30-minute webinar, and the recording will be sent out as well as the slide deck afterwards. I invite you to put any questions in the chat, and so glad people are here from all over the United States today, interested in how we approach this idea of resilience. So resilience, what is it? Well, it is, of course, the idea of bouncing back, the ability for us to withstand and recover from stressors. But we like to expand that to this definition from Ann Maston at the University of Minnesota. And she just says it's an ordinary superpower. I had the pleasure of learning with Dr. Maston at the University of Minnesota many years ago, and she's a very special person, and she understands the everyday magic of being human, because we're all off center every single day, and we bring ourselves back on, and then we get knocked off, and we bring ourselves back on. We have big upsets and huge drama and intense trauma, and people come through that and they come out of it. And there's specific reasons why they come through it, why we come through it, and how we come out of it. So let's look at stress just as a way of bringing a context in for teachers' resilience, our resilience as adults, how we handle it, and why that matters so much. Well, turns out that research shows teachers' use and modeling of their own social, emotional strategies and practices is directly correlated to students' emotional growth. Some of this research we did with Valerie Shapiro at UC Berkeley on our own social emotional learning program, and it was very clear, both in vivo, you stepped into a school and saw what people were doing, that it was the adults' centeredness, their own ability to handle their emotions that allowed the classroom to be great and allowed children to then access their own. So what gets in the way? Well, we have all sorts of challenges we face as teachers from our classroom struggles, the stress of everything that we're asked to do, especially in the times of pandemic, our own exhaustion, and then highlight emotions, because emotions really are the challenge. It's emotional unease, it's worry, upset, frustration, anxiety. These are the things that we need to be resilient from. And how we do that is very normal. So let's just look at this stress response continuum. We call this losing your cool. And this is just what human beings do. We're going along fine, something happens. Maybe it's a tough parent conversation or a difficult interaction with a colleague or a difficult interaction in the classroom. And we have a reaction. Our body naturally has a reaction to that. And we call those protective patterns, or natural reactive patterns, are born to protect us. We develop them to protect us. And yet they can cause us to go through the roof or disappear. And eventually we calm down and there's depletion and we get back on track. Well, how we handle this stress response is really vital to students' social emotional learning. And this quote from Jones, Buffard, and Weisbord at Harvard, a team of SEL researchers, say that children learn from the way adults manage frustration, how we stay focused in the face of distractions, how we shift tactics, how we work with our own emotional reactions. So this idea of our state of being is part of what we put in the method of practice, modeling, and coaching. In order to first be able to center ourselves and be whole, we have to practice that and practice anchoring to the things that help us be resilient. This picture of the woman with the violin is just a metaphor of our music. And our inner music impacts everything around us, impacts all the children in the classroom, everyone else in our day, and it particularly, of course, impacts us. So how does that work for students? What's the interplay between our state of being and students' state of being, their ability to be resilient? Well, that can all be seen in the power of modeling. There's a whole body of work on modeling, and modeling theory says there are three types of models. There's the dysfunctional model, who can go off balance, be reactive, sometimes come in, be in the space of the classroom as the victim, like, oh my God, these children are, ruining my life. It can be limiting, and it can come from the perspective of life is hard. We can all go there, we can get there, it's part of our human condition. But when people stay there, it doesn't allow children to learn about their own resilience. It helps them learn how to be dysfunctional themselves, being off. The opposite end of the spectrum is the perfect model. Perfect model holds him or herself in perfection, controlled. There's an inauthenticity to it because how we're actually feeling doesn't show up. And there's a fragility to being perfect. So if I come into the classroom and nothing impacts me and everything goes awry and I'm cool as a cucumber, what happens is children don't get to learn how to manage themselves because they're not seeing the modeling of how we manage ourselves. So perfection is a trap. And again, in the theory of modeling, the coping model is the learning model. The coping model is vulnerable, transparent, authentic, and strong. And they're in a learning mode. So when I think about my own resilience and I again, thrown off resilience, I think of a time when I did a lot of teaching as a counselor, and I had a 6th grade wellness class, and I just blew up one day at one of the kids in the class because his behavior was off the wall. I was a young teacher, didn't understand a lot of what I'm sharing today, and I got really upset. And it wasn't pretty, it wasn't fun, And that night I felt really bad about myself. But I went in the next day and pulled the class together in a tight, intimate circle. And I turned to this boy that I had yelled at, and I told him, I really lost it yesterday, and I just want to apologize. I explained some things about myself, but I was real with him. And from that day forward, the class changed entirely. My authenticity allowed him to trust me. And we're going to look at that a little bit more deeply later on as well. So the way that I'm authentic, the way that I'm transparent in my coping causes children to raise their esteem of the adult who does that. And it also allows them to realize, oh, when I'm off, I can change, I can recover, I can be resilient, I can apologize. So one of the words on this list is vulnerable, and I just want to look at that a little more carefully. This is from Brene Brown, one of my heroes, and she's a researcher in Texas. If you don't know her work, it's fabulous. She says vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. It's hard to be vulnerable. It means we have to show ourselves. We have to reveal ourselves. And she says, people who wade into discomfort and vulnerability and tell the truth about their lives are real. So in leadership lexicon, what we now know and what's really strong in the world of leadership is teaching leaders how to be honest and authentic and vulnerable and strong, and that's what causes people to follow them. So with that as a backdrop, let's just look at a couple of the ways that at Dovetail we look at resilience and our resilient ways of being. Now we have a very extensive model, which I'll share a little bit about at the end, but I want to begin with what we call resilient mindsets. So as teachers, as we step into our day of being with children, being with teenagers, can be adult teachers being with adult classes. Anyone who's a teacher can be ourselves in the role of being a teacher as a parent. We have three mindsets that we've distinguished that matter greatly. The first one is curiosity. And we like to shine the curiosity onto ourselves first. How am I being? What is my way of being? Am I really off today? Am I off center? Many master's teachers will go into the classroom at the beginning of the day if they're feeling down or depleted, and they'll just sit the classroom down and say, boys and girls, or, everybody, I just need to let you know I'm having a really tough day. And I'd love your patience, and I'd love your support, and we can have a great class today. I'm just a bit low in my usual self. And that kind of modeling lets students participate and contribute to the learning. They contribute to you as the teacher. So if we're curious about our state of being, it gives us a way to navigate and pivot and shift. When we notice we're off, then we can let the classroom know. When we notice it's getting really too loud in the classroom, we can say, I can't hear myself think, everybody. Could we just, please, that's the revelation of being real and being curious about how we are. The second mindset is choice, that we have these choices. We have the choice to notice ourselves. We have the choice to alter our behavior. We have the choice to ask for help if we need it with another teacher or classroom or the classroom itself, administrators. There are many choices that sometimes we keep out of our framework because we don't give ourselves the freedom to make choice. And then the third is courage. What kind of person do I want to be? If I step into the classroom thinking that, or into my life with this meta perspective of how in my heart do I want to be? We're going to look at that a little more closely. So let's start with combining these with our stress reaction. So here we are, back at the beginning. We get curious and we say, what the heck happened? I'm having a difficult time. I'm working through something in my own life, and I realize I'm taking it out on my wife, or I'm taking it out on my children, or I'm taking it out on my students. If I get curious about my own state of being, it changes everything because it lets me see and it gives me choice. So curiosity itself can let me pause and notice what's happening and then make a choice. And when we add that to the stress curve, we're beginning to manage our stress effectively as a coping model. We go off, we get triggered by an event, we notice how we are protecting ourselves, we get into our wonder and curiosity, and then we can start choosing something that will anchor us. Might be my breath, might be a moment of gratitude for something that's important in my life. That might be just switching my frame of reference from glass half empty to glass half full and realizing, oh my gosh, these kids need me so much and I want to be here for them. So choice allows us to lean into our resilience and to anchor into the kind of person that we want to be. Call that keeping our cool. So just a little bit more on choice. So much to understand about this. We have the event, which we call the stressor, and then we have our response to the event. And there's clearly a distinction between those two, and we call that the space of choice. Viktor Frankl coined this wonderful term. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, he, of course, lived through the concentration camps, wrote incredible work on man's search for meaning, and really understood that it was that space in between the events of what's happening outside and my reactivity or response in which I have choice. So let's go to the third mindset and see how that impacts our stress. It is courage. We say courage to be vulnerable is courage to feel, courage to know what's happening inside, and then courage to speak about it. Brene Brown takes us back to the very origin of courage, which is speaking one's mind by telling one's heart. This comes from the original meaning, originally from core, which means heart. I like to think of courage as following my heart. If I have courage, I have the courage to stand up for what's right. I have the courage to be with my feelings and how they are. When I do that in front of children, it's transformative for them. So they're not used to adults who do that. It's a powerful, transformative experience. So let's go back to Brene Brown, who says courage is to be comfortable in your heart space. To be comfortable in your heart space. So the power of courage is how to be honest, kind, strong, and vulnerable in this context of what kind of person do I want to be and how do I want to show up with my children, with my family, with anyone really. And when we bring courage into our stress, we can anticipate stress by anchoring our resilience. So instead of just being reactive to a stressful event, we know sometimes when stressful events will occur, and we can use our courage to anchor into a resilient skill, to walk into a difficult meeting with our head held high and our heart whole and open, so that if we have a parent meeting and we know that there's a mama bear parent coming in to give me heck for her child's experience. I can have compassion with an open heart. I can be an ally to that parent. I can be resilient with him or her so that she can get the best for his or her child. So what I want to bring to bear now on this question of teachers' resilience, our inner resilience, and the impact on students is the idea of connection and connecting strategies. Now, if you're familiar at all with what we teach at Dovetail, we teach three kinds of skills. Centering skills for personal resilience. What are the ways in which we get ourselves centered? We teach about connecting skills, which is about relational resilience and how we stay strong in relationship. And then collaborating skills, how to work with a whole group. There's very different distinctions in those skills. And we're just going to touch base on a few of the connecting skills today because they're deeply relevant to children's resilience in the face of our resilience as teachers. So as we look at connecting, again, it's about relational resilience. What we get so much from relationships. I mean, as a teacher, we are fed by our relationships with students. When we have authentic relationships with students, it's so great to see them, and we're so happy about it, and it just fills our hearts. And when we have difficult relationships, that brings us down, and it's hard. But when we can really understand what's happening for the student, that can open our heart to compassion, and we can have relational resilience with someone who doesn't think or know yet that they like us if our heart is open and we can keep them in our heart space. So I'm using a lot of Brene Brown today. What she says about connecting is it's the energy between two people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. Now, isn't that just what we all want and need? It goes back to Maslow's belonging. We want to belong. And what we need and what children need more than anything is this connecting, the energy of feeling seen, heard, and valued. Bonnie Bernard, grandmother of resiliency, researcher here in California at West Ed, wrote The Resiliency, What We Have Learned. She says that the number one factor for resilience in a child is the caring adult. It's our being there, our modeling of caring, our showing interest in them, our compassion for them, our listening and talking with them, and our patience. It's all about basic trust and safety. And Gabor Mate, one of my other heroes, doctor who is deeply in the field of ACEs and trauma-informed learning, says that this basic trust, it's the space in which children can know themselves. When we have empathy and compassion for what they're going through, it allows them room to let themselves in and know themselves. So let's look at two skills that help children experience that from us, with us. These are all the connecting skills that we teach. Noticing, there's a lot to that. It's not a simple thing. It's about really picking up on what people are going through, experiencing. Heartfelt listening, which we're going to talk about in a moment. The idea of empathy and compassion and how those two fit together. Choosing kindness even when things are really tough, or especially when things are really, really hard, and how significant it is when we choose kindness. And then speaking authentically, which I'll probably talk about in terms of speaking heartfully today as we look at that. So let's do a spotlight on these two skills, heartfelt listening and speaking authentically, and we'll hold it in the context of connection for children, and both our modeling it and them experiencing it. So first is heartfelt listening, and we'll use our mindsets of curiosity, choice, and courage to consider heartfelt listening, um, and just consider what it means to listen with an open heart. What does that feel like? We have a tagline for each of our skills. This one is feeling apart, listen with the heart. What does it look like to listen with our heart? Listening, the heart is the centrality of who we are. And it's the metaphor of the heart, the love that emanates from the heart. And in a minute, we'll look at the science behind that. Heartfelt listening is listening non-judgmentally. It's really taking in what we hear. It's giving space for the other. And it's not, interestingly, because most of us want to provide solutions. Heartfelt listening is never providing solutions. Sometimes you try and provide a solution to someone and they just want to run the other direction or push you away. And for kids especially, they want to contribute to their own solution. They want to be able to do it themselves. So when we give solutions or direct solutions, it's not as effective as when we invite their ideas for solutions. So heartfelt listening is really all about the heart. And it turns out that there's huge power in the heart. Part of my training is with the HeartMath Institute. And this is a diagram of the power of the electromagnetic field of the heart. And what HeartMath Institute, which is a think tank research organization in California that's connected with the neurocardiology research in institutions all over the world, they say that the heart is like a Wi-Fi system. And they've actually hooked people up with electrodes in one room and someone else with electrodes on their heart space in another room. And they have this person think of something negative, and the shift in the heart in this person is seen in the electrodes in the heart of the other person. So our heart is transmitting information across the space through the wavelength of the heartbeat, and everyone in proximity is picking it up. It's just about the fascination of everything that occurs. Just one other tidbit: the heart is telling the brain what to do 90% of the time, not the other way around. We often learn that all our neurons are in the head. Well, they're not. They're actually also embedded fully in the heart. It's now in medical terms called the heart brain. And I'm bringing this in as important because how we are and how we are interfacing in our resilience with a child impacts them in an unconscious way. And it's about our own self-regulation, which you can see in this slide. Shows you that on one side we have stress and anxiety. We call it freeze, fight, or flight. And the heart is literally beating out of coherence with itself in a staccatic way. That's measured by the space between the heartbeats. And when we move ourselves into self-regulation, when we bring ourselves into resilience, into alignment, our calmness allows our heart to start beating in harmony to itself, which is called technically heart coherence. And when we're in heart coherence, we can impact the heart coherence of the people around us. So our resilience impacts directly the resilience of the children we're in the space with, or anyone else for that matter. So that's heartfelt listening. We do a spotlight on heartfelt speaking authentically, which I'm going to reframe as heartfelt speaking. We'll use our curiosity, choice, and courage about that, and just consider together, when I authentically talk, hearts unlock. So we're talking about our resilience, but let's consider how it impacts a child when we're speaking authentically. and just be curious about how that works, how I can speak my truth in this moment by being open, vulnerable, strong, and kind, which is the coping model. Um, and the coping model, of course, that's what kids want. They want our truth. Um, I've worked in middle schools for years and years, and no one has a stronger BS meter than a middle school student. And teacher pretends to be a certain way or have it all together. Those kids can read right through it. They can take a substitute teacher who isn't in his or her resilience and just send them home crying because they just have that BS meter so strongly they just will not put up with anything but authenticity. But when we talk to students fully, completely, wholly from our truth, they hear it and it goes in and they feel felt, heard, seen, and whole, like they can be part of themselves. Well, I've just got a couple more slides here and we'll be done. And I'm bringing in something from Gabor Mate about modeling authenticity. As I said, he's a doctor who works in the space of trauma. Brilliant. He's got incredible stuff on YouTube. You can just look up Gabor Mate and see some of his stuff. And he put together something for me just the other night. I was watching a video of his that I had never understood. And it's just so important. And it was about the connection between attachment and authenticity. So we all, in this case, think of children and ourselves as a child, we had, and children have, this primary need for attachment, which is the drive for closeness and proximity. It's being connected with another human being. And if our mom or dad is not present or they're working all day and they can't be present to us at night, we don't get that sense of closeness and proximity. And we can lose our sense of attachment. If we have an alcoholic parent, this is an extreme example, they just can't be there, we don't have that attachment. Well, what does that have to do with our authenticity? Turns out pretty much everything. We also have a need for authenticity, and children have this need for authenticity from the very beginning. At the beginning, something happens and they can scream bloody murder or cry as a baby. They're being totally authentic. They're being themselves. Authenticity is the need to be connected to self. Authenticity has to do with the self, the whole self, our physical somatic being. And it's being connected to ourselves. It's being connected in our heart. It's being connected to our emotions. And when we don't get attachment from a teacher or an important adult or a parent, we drop authenticity. That means attachment trumps authenticity every time because kids need attachment so much that they give themselves up and they give up their authenticity, they give up their awareness of their feelings, what's true for them, and even those kids who fight mightily with their behavior to show that they can be authentic, they're struggling because they don't have that closeness and proximity with the adult. So our sense of resilience means everything to that ability for children to grow their own connection to themselves and their resilient authenticity. I'm going to show this overview of our approach and then show you a couple of resources that are available. These are the 5 types of resilience that we teach about: reactive resilience, personal resilience, relational, which we just talked about, connecting, group, which is the collaborative piece, and then cultural resilience, which I have not talked about. In some ways can be the most important. It's what we inherit intergenerationally from our culture and our family and our religion and our politics and our race, our ethnicity, to show us, give us what we believe and think. It's marvelous to understand, because when we really understand it, we can open our heart to anyone in the world, because we can understand why they are the way they are. Well, if you want to learn more about why people are the way they are, please connect with our open education resources. We have books, student workbook that's about to be finished. We have tons of video on our website, YouTube channel. We have digital downloads at www.dilllearning.org. Here's an example of two of our education books. This is the Practical Skills for a Resilient Educator book. It goes into all the skills and the patterns deeply, with the science behind them, and we're within weeks or at least a month of getting this Practical Skills for Student workbook, which is marvelous. So thank you all for being here. You can reach out to me at chuck@dovetaillearning.org. I'm so happy you could join us. I did go a little bit over our time, and so I appreciate it deeply, your listening, and wish you well on your journey.